Most of you probably know about Jordan Peterson as someone who is trying to put the society on the right track by standing up against woke culture, as someone who is true to himself and his principles.
And so I'm very careful with what I say, and I'm very careful with what I write. Like if I write something down, it's not an opinion. I mean, obviously it is because it's my thought.
Sure.
But I try to take those sentences and beat them to death. I'm trying only to leave on the paper things I cannot get under and flip over. So, and that's with every...
But analyzing him just a little bit, you would realize that he is a hypocrite. He uses different rules and principles to judge things he like and dislike. Here's a video of him recommending how racism should be dealt with.
Things need to be particularized rather than generalized, as a general rule, let's say. And so this cricket player was facing racism by his own account. The question is, who, when, what, exactly? Because otherwise it degenerates into something like a discussion of structural racism. And when it becomes abstracted up to that level, first of all, that pits group against group, which I think is entirely counterproductive.
This was the case of Pakistani-born English cricketer who faced racist comments from his fellow teammates and other people involved in the sport. He said, we should deal with the comments on individual level and not make it structural. First of all, there is nothing called individual racism. Racism is inherently structural. It can be defined as discrimination against someone based on an already existing social norm or social construct. Anyway, he said that racism should not be treated as a structural problem as it do not help solve racism. It only caused people to stand up against each other, and each incident of discrimination against people of color should be treated individually, closing the eyes on the fact that it could have been caused by structural biases.
He was repeatedly called abusive terms directly linked to his ethnicity.
By who?
By not just one, but repeated members of the Yorkshire Cricket Club. He's
Okay,
had people
well,
contact him. If it walks like a duck, Jordan, talks like a duck, it's a duck. It's racism.
I'm not denying his experience.
Right.
What I asked was exactly who and when, and you just answered that question. So I would say those specific people should be held specifically to account for their actions before any movement up the abstraction hierarchy to a discussion of something like structural racism, which I don't think is helpful.
Well, he has talked about institutional racism in cricket. He says that's what he's experienced as a term, institutional racism.
Right, I know. And like I said, I believe that abstracting up the problem to that level of analysis does no good because it pits groups against groups.
Now let's apply this principle to one of his bigger achievements, post of a woman wearing a certain dress. There is no structural racism, but the image of a woman is posted by some fascist Marxist and authoritarian dragon, which Jordan Peterson has to fight with single-handedly. Why not deal with it the same way you deal with racism? Why not just think of it as a social media post that should be criticized individually rather than thinking of it as an authoritarian post forcing you to believe that some woman is beautiful, although there is no evidence from that post that it is forcing you to believe that she is beautiful. The only maximum conclusion that can be drawn from this post is that it is a way of normalizing a certain body type. We know that women feel societal pressure to look a certain way, but when we use social media to make them realize that your body shape is not always in your control, it is authoritarian. Even if you still do not like the image, you are free to do so. But saying that it is a structural problem is hypocrisy, because in case of racism, he said we should handle such cases individually rather than assuming that there is a structural problem.
I believe that abstracting up the problem to that level of analysis does no good because it pits groups against groups. I think it exacerbates the problem.